After 30 years of being in the in-home sales industry, I've learned something interesting. The best salespeople aren't always the ones that, ask the better questions or have the better presentations. It's that new reps, they notice things that new reps usually miss out on. Welcome back to the in-home sales expert. My name is Brent, and today I want to share some of the things that experienced reps notice within the first few minutes of a sales appointment that maybe some inexperienced reps would miss out on. One of the most important ones would be reading the room before they start selling. New reps, and wrote along with countless number of new reps over my career, and I was one of them, so I understand. But one of the first things that I always see is new reps will jump right into the presentation. They'll introduce themselves, maybe do a warm up just for a minute, but then boom, they are right in to the sales presentation. And then they're following up and they're into the script immediately. And what happens is they haven't even really read the room of their customers to figure out, what's the best route to go during that presentation. So some of the key things are, what are their energy levels? Are they really just laid back, or are they super engaging with a ton of energy? Those are going to be two different presentations, but it takes a minute to notice that. Are they stressed? Are they excited? A lot of times you can tell if a customer's had a rough day. A lot of times they'll just tell you that. And when that happens, your presentation needs to be tailored a little bit differently. These are things that experienced reps will notice when they're actually reading the room when they first come in, that new reps will not. So when I walk into a house and if a customer seems distracted or stressed, I know that I'm going to step back for a minute and slow down before I even talk about anything that I came to talk to. And it might even get to that point where I can share a little bit and get them to open up about what they're stressed about. Kind of take that away, get them not distracted and take that stress away before I even start thinking about the presentation. Another thing is, experienced reps really pay attention to figuring out who is the decision maker. Huge, huge, huge. So new reps automatically focus on whoever's talking the most, right? I see it all the time. You come in and you sit down and there's a couple and they're sitting at a table and one person is talking a lot and the other person is just sitting back there. Most new reps will just assume that person that's talking the most is going to be the one that's making decisions. That's not always the case. A lot of times it is, but that's not always the case. What I look for and what an experienced rep will look for is, who looks at each other as you're talking, right? So I may be asking this person and we may be talking, and then before they answer the question, they may look over at the other person, right? That's a key signal. It's like, I'm talking to that person, but I'm pretty sure that person over there is making decisions, because every time they're getting ready to answer a question, they look at the other person first to make sure. Also, who's asking the practical questions, right? And who's asking the financial questions? If I'm having a conversation with the person who I think is the decision maker, but they're asking a ton of questions about the products and we're talking about kind of options for what they want, but the other person, maybe it's the wife who's asking all the financial decisions. What about financing and are there cash discounts? And if that person is asking me the financial questions, I know that they're probably going to make the final decision or be a big part of that final decision. So the loudest customer, the loudest person at the table is not necessarily the decision maker. So I watch for interactions with each other more than the words that we're talking about. Noticing buying signals early is a key. New reps will a lot of the time wait for obvious buying signals. But when you're sitting down with somebody, whether it doesn't matter whether it's single or a couple, when you're sitting down with them, there's a lot of buying signals within there that you can see before they're giving you the obvious ones. Certain things that they're going to talk about, like for instance, in my instance, are they talking about, hey, how long is the installation going to take? And if your crews were here, where do you think they would park? Would they park in the driveway, or would I need to make extra room? Or, I'm getting ready to do siding, so if I'm going to do these new windows, you see what I'm saying? They're asking questions, but these questions are buying signals. They're not saying, if we bought, I think we really want to do this. They're asking these questions, but they are telling me by asking those questions, we are super interested in your product. Those things are, during the conversation, things that experienced reps will pick up on, but newer reps are, you're so focused on your presentation, you're basically waiting for them to say, yes, I'm ready to buy. And those are big things. People often, they're buying the products long before they're saying yes. It's just up to us to be able to know what those buying signals are, so we know when to ask for the close. Noticing problems before the customer does, maybe they're not mentioning things, but I'm noticing problems. I love doing that. For instance, I'll give you an example. And because newer reps come in and they're, like I said, just looking straight for the presentation. When I go in and I'm looking at the house, and we're doing maybe some discovery, we're looking around, they're giving me maybe a tour of the place, and maybe talking about what they're looking. Maybe there's a specific something they're looking for, but I see a few things. So I'll use windows as an example because that's where I've spent most of my career. I'll look and say, you know what, Mr. Customer, I see right here on this specific window, I know we're looking at some other ones, but there's a couple things that I think you could do here that would extend the life of that window 3, 5, maybe 10 years. Let me show you what those are. So when I'm doing that, I'm talking about a lot of things that aren't making me money, but what it's doing is it's building credibility. So credibility is growing when I'm not selling anything, but I'm trying to help them. Of course, I want to sell them windows, but if I can help them along the way, that builds credibility for them to listen to me more carefully when I'm actually trying to sell them on the project that I really came there for. That's super important. And building that credibility is a process and it's a learning curve. And a lot of new reps don't have that. And that's specifically what this channel is for. I want to help you guys understand how to do things where you can build credibility so it makes that closing much easier. One of the big things that I struggled on probably early on is, and it's just my personality, when we're in sales, we talk. I'm sure you've heard the jokes, and you maybe have been part of one where, salespeople just don't know when to shut up, right? We constantly talk. And it's actually one of the things that is a huge flaw with 90% of salespeople. We just can't listen. And new reps are specifically vulnerable to that because they are so focused on trying to teach people and help people, their presentations and their scripts, and they're so focused on trying to remember everything they need to say, they completely forget to just stop and let customers think and listen to them. You don't need to fill every silence with words. Sometimes you just need to let people sit and think, and some people you need to let them sit and think so they can talk to each other and let questions develop. And the reason I brought that up is because I remember a specific couple that I was with. This is a few years back, and I remember I was talking, and they were engaging, but they weren't very talkative. They would engage when they had a question, but they weren't very talkative, and I felt like I was doing all the talking. And I finally uh, just stopped. I got to a little stopping point in my presentation as we were talking through things, and I just stopped. And it was, we all have what's called an awkward silence. And we have to be willing to do that just to stop talking for 10 or 15 seconds. I know that sounds like it actually doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're in the moment, 10 or 15 seconds can feel like 5 minutes. But if I sat there And I finally just stopped and let them kind of think about it. And I was like getting nervous, like, oh God, And then all of a sudden, they started talking to each other and kind of asking more and more questions. And what that did was it got them talking together and they became more engaging, which was awesome. Because then they started asking me maybe more questions that they each fed off of each other, and they started asking me more questions, and it made the sale go so much more smooth. And it's because I shut up, I let them talk it out, and then finally we got more and more questions, and it ended up being a great sale. And it's just one of those things where you have to be able to learn how to stop talking and let your customers get more involved. Noticing what customers actually care about is a huge piece that experienced reps will realize and try to figure out when new reps have no idea. And what that means is, if you're brand new, maybe to in-home sales, but maybe to a different company, right? You're trying to learn all the products, how to sell the products, all the features, and you're so focused on your product being the best, and this is why, and these are the features that's this feature and this feature, and you're so focused on selling your product and the features, you're not really understanding what they're actually caring about, right? Maybe it's if it's a house or it's a certain room, maybe it's the grandkids coming, and they want this room set up better. Maybe it's energy bills. They want the place to be more efficient, comfort and safety. And, I've had several customers recently have just said, we get talking about, what brings me out or whatever, like, right, you know what? I'm just tired of this place looking like crap. This looks like crap. I want this better. It's pride in their home, right? So when I hear some of these things and what they're actually caring about, the features that I have that I could sell, those go out the window. I'll cover them briefly, but I'm focused in on energy bills. That's what they're talking about. So my features that I'm selling are going to be on energy and how I can make their house more energy efficient. New reps completely miss that a lot of times and go straight to, I have to talk about all these features. And you don't need to talk about all the features. You need to focus on what your customers care about. Customers are buying solutions to what they care about. They're not necessarily buying your 2 or 3 features that you think are the best thing that we've ever invented. Experiences, it's not about doing more appointments. It's not about, I've only done 10 appointments, so if I do 100 appointments, I'm gaining all this experience. It's about learning what to pay attention to, learning those buying signals, learning some of that subconscious things that happen during the appointment. That's where experience really matters. And experienced reps seeing those things early on in the appointment can make a huge difference. So the next time you're in a sales appointment, I want to challenge yourself to spend less time thinking about what you're going to say. We all do that, right? We're so focused in on it, and we're not even, a lot of times we're not even listening to the homeowner, which is horrible, right? Let's challenge ourselves to think about less about what we're going to say and more about what's happening around you. I guarantee you, if you do that, especially these next couple of appointments, I guarantee you're going to pick up on things that you haven't in the past, and it's going to become crystal clear. And like, man, I wish I would have known that on this appointment or this appointment or this appointment. So listen, if you're in in-home sales and you want to get better and learn more credibility-based selling, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We're going to do tons of real-world sales situations and learn how building with credibility is going to increase your close rate. So if you're really looking to get better in in-home sales, subscribe to that and let's get started. Also, if you want to go deeper into this, you can check out the Credibility Closers community that I have, where I share lessons that I've learned over the being in in-home sales for 30 years. There's a gazillion things that I've learned, and I love sharing that stuff. And I will leave description or links to both the Credibility Closers community, and also my website, which has a ton of information on training that I do. So If you're looking to get better, subscribe and let's get started.